Like I said, I don't really have a formal way of starting these, Tom. For those of you watching or listening, thanks for joining us. I am joined by Tom Nicol or Nichols. I can never remember what that.
Nicol, singular.
Nichols. Okay, Nicol. Yeah, singular. Nicol. Joined by Tom Nicol, a filmmaker based out of Central Illinois, specifically 5 blocks away from where I'm sitting right now in Champaign, and we are social distancing as best as we can. Tom, thank you for doing this with me and chatting with me tonight.
Thanks for asking me.
Yeah. So, Tom, you've been making films and videos and stuff for quite some time. Could you kind of give us a little bit of background on, yourself, how you got started, maybe what interested you in filmmaking,
Sure.
As a career even?
Yeah. So, if you want to talk about getting started, then you got to go back over 20 years at this point.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people, I got into making movies when I was like 12. One of the big things was my grandmother gave me the Steven Spielberg Lego movie making set that came with a Lego stud equipped webcam so that you could, set it on things and make little dollies, and it had stop-mo software attached to it. So I got into stop-mo that way. But I've always been big on stories, and at that age, a lot of pretend play. Actually, funny, here in quarantine, I'm going to a whole lot of running RPGs, so I'm right back to pretend play. It's how we get by, right?
Yeah.
So got into making movies when I figured out that it was possible to record a performance. So you weren't just doing a play once; you could record it and do it over and over, and it last forever, right? So that was fun. And I continued that on and off through high school and college. In college, I didn't study film. I studied engineering, and professionally, I'm a software engineer now. But my dad gave me the very wise observation as I was considering potential college paths that he's like, you got filmmaking on one hand and engineering on the other, and one of those costs a lot of money to do. One of those tends to make a lot of money. So, I was like, this is a pretty good point. And it's worked out pretty well. I've been able to, fund my filmmaking endeavors with my engineering career. And there's some great synergy there.
Great. On the record, would you ever pursue filmmaking as an actual career?
I mean, nothing's off the table. I'm not looking for a career change right now. There's a certain freedom in not doing it as a job.
Right.
I just did a fairly expansive hired project last year. There was this company called Wild Brain that had this fairly large YouTube show for little girls called Kitty Zuza.
Sure.
And they wanted to make a male-targeted similar show, Super Zuza, with, instead of Disney princess characters going on adventures, have superhero characters going on adventures, but they're all played by, 8-year-olds. And so, it was fun. It was a ton of work. I didn't have complete creative control. There were, once we kind of got into the swing of things, then it became a lot easier to sort of work within the bounds of what I knew they were going for and figure out something that would be fun to do. But still, it's very, very different to work in that sort of creative space, even when you're doing, fun, goofy episodes that you are writing yourself. So you have a measure of control over, what is it you're going to do, and getting to play with, cool special effectsy things that you've been meaning to mess with anyway. And it's a very different thing from, just sitting down and writing a thing because you want to, and getting people together who want to make the same thing you do and just making it happen. And, there's a lot to be said for keeping that freedom.
Sure. Yeah. Which, I don't necessarily make films in the grand scheme of things. I think maybe on my LinkedIn profile, I call myself a filmmaker, just for SEO purposes, frankly. But, I make commercials and just videos, and I deal with that on a daily basis. I mean, I have very little creative control in the grand scheme of things. And And I, yearn for a day that maybe I get that,
Yeah.
You got this, how did you get that big project, by the way? I remember you and I had talked about that, over
Oh
beers at
yeah.
one point. Yeah, but it was, maybe walk us through that a little bit. It was a long project too, like almost a year long, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was really close to a year from getting the project to getting sign off on the last episode. I mean, like most things, it comes down to who you know, and
Sure.
happened to be who I knew was my good friend Joe Taylor, who used to run a winery here in central Illinois, and then he sold the winery and moved to Mexico, then decided he wasn't ready to retire completely, and so he moved back to Wisconsin, and he's a eccentric artist out there. And one of the things that he's been doing as an eccentric artist out in Wisconsin is a YouTube show called Patty and Paz, which was hired out by the same company. And it's a puppet show that he was shooting on green screen with these really lovely puppets. It's an adorable show. And it, there's some fun to be had watching it, even if you're not the target audience.
Sure.
But it meant that, he had these connections with this company. And so they actually originally went to him with this pitch. They're like, hey, we want to do this superhero show. We really like what you're doing with Patty and Paz. Are you interested? And he's like, I don't know that I could work something of that scale up here by myself, but I know people down in Champaign who have the kind of resources to do this craziness. And so he got us hooked up with that project.
Cool. How does that, so I'm guessing that sounds more along the lines of like what I, again, of what I do, where someone says, hey, I know this person, they'll make this video for you. When it comes to your own personal projects, I kind of want to pivot that way a little bit. How do you get those made? So you've got you've worked on several, if not more, short films that I'm aware of. So, when you come up with, let's say, an idea, where do you go from there to get that made? Yourself, or, because you're not the one hiring someone to make the movies for you. You're doing it.
Right.
I mean, you're the one that's like behind the camera, directing, setting up lighting. So how do you get those made? How do you get those passion projects made? And how does that differ maybe from, some of this commercial work or paid work, maybe?
Yeah. Well, in terms of the difference between how I approach personal projects and how I approached Super Zuza, on my end, once the project is actually happening, then it wasn't all that different. Like there was an actual budget involved, which is not usually what I'm working with a whole lot. But other than that, it was still using my local network, using the resources I knew were in town. And that's the same way that I get my own personal projects done. It's a lot easier now that I've lived in Champaign for, over a decade on and off. There was college in there somewhere.
Yeah.
But, I know a lot of people who do the kind of things that are great for movie making. And, it's not that hard to, approach a project and say, who do we need for this? And then just hit them up and figure out when people have time to throw at it, and then just knock it out. Usually I'm aiming to shoot something that you can get out in a weekend or two. Sometimes it'll stretch farther than that. I had one like half-hour short that I shot back in like 2011, 2012 that took maybe over a year of on and off getting stuff done. But that's kind of what you do when you're working around people's schedules, when you're not, hiring people to be there for a week and you're going to shoot this whole thing. Then you're working around your own work hours. You're working around what time other people have. Then it tends to get protracted a bit. But, it really just comes down to knowing people who have similar tastes, similar interests, and the skill set that you need to make a movie happen.
Cool. One of the things that I was blown away by, and I grew up in this area, like 15 miles from here. I was not really in the filmmaking video crowd at all. I didn't even really realize that was a career until I went to college, and then I came back about a year and a half ago, and I was blown away by the community here in town, specifically the kind of creative filmmaking community. I I want to talk about that a little bit, and why is that important? Having that community when it comes to when you're thinking about making a film, why is that important to have a community of these like-minded people here in town or nearby?
Well, yeah. Well, for film in particular, then community is really important because it is a collaborative art form. In very rare cases, somebody can make a movie entirely by themselves, but most of the time you're going to have a crew. You're going to have actors in front of the camera while there are people working behind the camera. Even when people are, working one-man band operations, then there are still connections that you need to have, and more than, one person literally physically there. So being able to get to know people who would be interested in doing those sorts of projects is huge in getting them off the ground. And Champaign is a little weird in that respect because a lot of places when you have a big film presence, then it's because there is, a lot more commercial opportunities for it. And a lot of the people who are in Champaign, a lot of it is driven by the university and Carl. I think are probably the two biggest.
Which is one of the hospital places here in town.
Yeah.
For those of are not familiar with Champaign, yeah.
But university in particular, this is Champaign-Urbana is very much a university town, always has been, and it doesn't really have a film program. You can do a cinema studies major. Yep. Occasionally they'll have like a semester seminar where you can actually get a little bit of production experience and make a movie, but it's not really a major track that they have. So the people that we get coming in for the university are usually here for some other reason and just happen to want to make movies. And we just happen to exist at a particular time where there happen to be a lot of people in Champaign who are interested in making movies. And so it's just a really fun time to be here.
Cool. And I agree. So staying on the community focus for just another minute, there's two things, and probably more, I'm probably missing a bunch, but there's two things that I think are really kind of unique to the area. And I want to hear the story from you. But there's a local group, a filmmaking group, the Champaign Movie Makers. And this is how I met you early on. I'd heard about it when I lived 60 miles or 50 miles down the road. But then I came and I realized it was like a monthly meetup of people that are interested in making films. How do you, I don't believe you started the group, correct me if I'm wrong there, but how do you create a group like that? And tell us maybe a little bit more about like that group. What do they do? What's the importance of it? Maybe your role in it and some of the things that you guys do to promote filmmaking.
Mm-hmm. So you're right. I did not start Champaign Movie Makers. That was a guy named Johnny Robinson. Started it in about 2008. Mm-hmm. I think that he was actually living in New York at the time and dating a woman in Champaign.
That old story.
And so it was kind of coming back and forth. And there was a group where he lived, Rochester, New York, that was Rochester Movie Makers. And he's like, this is really great. Let's see if we can get something like that going in Champaign. And so, when he started, it was just like, 5 people meeting in his living room. And it grew over the years. I got involved in 2009 when I had graduated college and come back here for grad school. And around 2011, then he wasn't having time to really put into running the group. And so he asked me to take it on. And so I've kind of been organizing it since then. So you mentioned the monthly meetings.
Yeah. So what do you guys do as part of Champaign Movie Makers?
So the main sort of mission statement that I have for it is providing opportunities for people to connect. Because, there's a lot of people in town who do this, and my experience joining the group was that I was working on one level and then getting to know the people in the group and help out on their projects and just sort of be involved in general, not even making my own projects yet. But like that brought my game up so much.
Yeah.
And so just having those opportunities to like say, hey, you know, we're just going to hang out and shoot the shit. We're going to, you know, talk shop, bring in the gear that we use and sort of talk about what our favorite stuff is. And that kind of thing. And I think the other branch of Champagne Movie Makers that has been really successful is the Facebook group. I should say Facebook groups. There's a couple specialized ones. There's the main Facebook group. Then there's Champagne Casting Call that is specifically aimed at actors.
Sure.
So that, you know, actors who aren't necessarily interested in the you know, here's this cool camera review that somebody's posting in the Champagne Movie Makers group. It's specifically for people who aren't, you know, totally tuned in all the time, but when there's an opportunity to act, then there's this space that, you know, you're going to have stuff coming by on your newsfeed that is specifically tailored to your interest. But over the course of, you know, the past 20 years, 25 years, the internet has grown so much, has become so much a part of our lives that having that sort of online presence has made it a whole lot easier to connect people in a town like this.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if you are only meeting once a month, then, you know, there's some really great conversations that can happen there. There are a lot of great connections that can happen there. But if, you know, you've got a project coming up in a couple of weeks and the meeting is right after that, then, you know, it's a little harder to round up crew. And from the beginning, Champagne Movie Makers did have an online presence at a Yahoo group that was dedicated to it. But the advantage of moving it to something like Facebook is that it's easier for things to sort of filter out a little bit, permeate outside of the circle of people who already know and are already involved. It's a lot easier to, you know, invite a friend who might not be in the group but might be interested in a particular meeting. Just say, hey, you know, there's this thing going on, and loop people in that way. So yeah, if you're looking to start a community, then this is a better time than any time in the past to do that.
In human history, essentially.
Absolutely.
I mean, honestly,
yeah, no, the age that we are living through right now is completely unprecedented in level of communication possibilities. So if you want to get people together and find the people who are interested in the same things that you are, this is a great time to do it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I mean, really, that's the big thing that I wanted to touch on with the Champagne Movie Makers group is that, I mean, it's just so easy now. I mean, you still have to get people off their asses and stuff, but I mean, it's so much easier than, you know, like for instance, you mentioned the once a month meeting. You've got one project or something that happens and you miss one meeting and then you miss the next one. And suddenly it's been 3 months, 4 months since you've been a part of that group. Whereas like the Facebook one, I know, we can share tutorials or fun videos or tips or behind the scenes shots like that, you know, right away with everyone in that group. And it's also a really good way for people to share and say, hey, you might be interested in this group. Why don't you check it out? And that they don't have to come to like a meeting and sit there awkwardly. I mean, those are great meetings and, you know, they're run really well and everyone's really personable. But they don't have to come there and sit there and take the time to take like 2 hours out of a Monday once a month to go to a meeting.
Right.
They can just go to the Facebook group and say, oh yeah, I would be interested, you know, maybe in that. And I was just blown away when I came to the community and I saw that this group existed and that it was active on Facebook and like, you know, and I could get involved from the comfort of my own home, but then I could also come to the meetings, you know, and get involved that way. So, which is great. So some of the other things, in addition to building community, one of the things that I know we did was a lighting workshop, which I think was was fun. You know, what is the reasoning behind, you know, maybe doing something like that or some of the other workshops that you guys have put on over the past few years?
Because it's fun.
Yeah. I realized that's probably the answer I wanted when I asked that question.
I mean, there's a range of skill levels in the group. And for some people, then, you know, you're going to come to one of these lighting workshops and you're not going to know anything that anybody's doing, and you're going to come away with a better understanding of how to do lighting. And for
Sure.
some people, then you're coming in and you know what you're doing, and you have this fun challenge you've set for yourself of, trying to recreate this particular look or whatever the project happens to be. And so that sort of meeting is really fun because there's a lot there for people of all different experience levels.
Sure. Yeah. It's, in my experience, when the most recent one that I was at, it reminded me of being on a film set, where you could see what was going on and you could ask questions and say like, hey, what is this device that you're using? Or why are you putting, this kind of gel in front of your light or whatever? And I think the biggest part for me, and it was fun and challenging for me, less than it was like a learning experience, probably just because I've been doing stuff for a while, but was being able to see people do it in a worry-free, like a stress-free environment where you could just learn. I thought that was really, really neat. And again, something that if someone is listening to this or watching and interested in putting together one of these groups, I think that those workshops are invaluable for people in the group to kind of see, what they can do and the possibilities, and learn maybe a little bit more about gear or technique, and also get to know people, too, because it was kind of like a impromptu, stress-free mixer, of sorts. We were all chatting while people were setting up lights and doing stuff. Cool. The other thing that I want to get back to that happens in the community is the Pins de Lens program, thing. Tell us a little bit about that, and pretty much any background information you have on that and your involvement in it too.
Sure. So Pens to Lens, for anybody who doesn't know, is a K-12 student screenwriting competition that we've run annually since 2013. And we've started branching out in the past few years into encouraging kids to make their own films. Oh, also I should back up. The prize for the screenwriting competition is the winning scripts are actually produced as short films by local filmmakers.
Yep.
And we have this big fun show at the Virginia Theater, which is this beautiful old theater in downtown Champaign with like a 50-foot screen, and kids get to walk the red carpet and see their movie on the screen and go up on stage and get applause, and great time for everybody. But we're also encouraging kids to make their own films, so we have sort of a sprouted off Pens to Lens student filmmaking competition, which we're actually focusing on exclusively this year. Hopefully kids are able to, make some quarantine films and shoot them our way.
Yeah. Hopefully.
But yeah, so it's very focused on promoting filmmaking as an art for kids in the community, the same way that, you might have dance or theater as an art that kids get to do. We live at a time where the technology is such that, a lot of people can make movies. It's very, very accessible. And so just sort of showing them, this is the movie that you wrote that was produced by people who live here in this town. And, it brings it into the realm of possibility rather than being this far off thing. You have to go to Hollywood to do this. Here you are in Champaign and these movies are happening and there's your story on the screen.
Yeah. That's just like so fucking awesome, man, for like a kid to see that.
Right?
Right?
Yeah. But yeah, so there were a group of us in the early 2010s who got the Champaign-Urbana Film Society together with the goal of setting up, bringing in more outside resources. So rather than like Champaign movie makers being focused on connecting local people, the idea behind CU Film Society was to say, bring in, other filmmakers to hold workshops, or, bring in independently produced movies for local screenings and discussion, that sort of thing. And so we had some success getting some of that stuff together. But then we were talking about, like, how could we really get the community interested in film? Like, what is what is it we could do that would really grab people's attention?
Yeah.
And
Start them young.
yeah, I think it was local actor named Bill Kephart who was in the group there, and he's like, what works for theater when you've got a theater that needs to make rent, then run a kids show, because everybody shows up for it, because seeing kids stuff is fun.
Oh yeah.
And so it sort of snowballed from there, thinking of how we could have the lowest barrier to entry opportunity for kids to get involved in film. And we figured that writing a screenplay is something that you don't need any special equipment to do.
Yeah.
Anybody can write a screenplay. And so starting off with that as the goal, get them thinking about stories, getting them thinking about how they can tell these stories on the screen, and then showing them that actually happening there in their community as a way to sort of inspire kids to get involved, make this a part of their lives. And it's been running for like 7 years. So we've had some kids who were involved and have now graduated and gone on to college. And I know a few of them who are studying film or acting. And
That's
it's like,
great.
yeah. Really super excited to see where they go.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great program. And I was, the ripe age of like 19 before I realized that I could do video production outside of Hollywood, and it was another thing that when I came back, to this community, and I saw that there was this like really rich, really vibrant program with these like, you show up to the theater and there are all these like little kids in tuxedos and dresses, and it's like this fancy show. I mean, it's like a fancy Hollywood gala, pre-show or whatever. Then they go in and they screen the films, and the films are, all endearing, even like, I'm not even gonna call it the worst one, even the worst ones that you see are still cutesy and well done. And they're, the filmmakers put like their heart and soul into them, and to produce them. And I just thought it was like so cool. And I was like, I would have given anything to be like an 8-year-old kid or 12-year-old kid and have this in my community at that time. So I think that like, that's like one of the coolest things. And it's another way that local filmmakers can get involved and get to know each other.
It has been a really great motivator to, have, a project or two over the summer that, we've I think the average number of movies each year is somewhere in the upper teens.
Yeah.
And over the course of, since 2013, then local filmmakers have produced over 100 movies.
Wow.
Based on kid scripts to date, which
so cool.
kind of blows my mind when I actually think about it.
Yeah.
It's like, this is a crazy, awesome community that made that sort of thing happen.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like you would have to go to a larger metropolitan area to find 100, over the course of that many years, 100, short films being produced. Obviously there's probably more than that in like New York and LA, but
sure.
I mean, like we're also a community 1/18th or something the size of any of those. That's wild. I can't believe that number, by the way. That's pretty wild. Very cool. So a couple of other questions back to the actual like kind of filmmaking process. I want to talk about your your filmmaking process. So, I've seen several of your films. Walk me through how you get from an idea or come up with an idea through, maybe like an audience seeing it on a screen,
Sure.
And, leave as many stones unturned as you want, or leave no stone unturned. Because I know that this is like a huge thing to talk about, but
yeah. I mean, it depends a lot on the type of project, first off. So I do both live action movies and stop motion.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And
yeah.
the production process is very different for those two things. How about this? What's one of the projects that I've done that you've seen, and I'll walk through that as a case study.
Oh, sure. So walk me through, what was the one that we watched at the film festival that you and Andrew, I think, had worked on?
Hide and Seek.
Yeah. Walk me through something like that, like a really like high end short film that's like,
sure, yeah,
more thought out, I guess.
So, in case people haven't seen it, and it's not publicly available yet because we're still doing the film festival thing. Hide and Seek is basically about a couple of sisters who are left home alone, and have to contend with a creepy app on one of their phones that comes off as this cutesy little game at first, but then starts to get really sinister really fast.
Oh, and it gets sinister. It gets real creepy, man.
So the genesis of that idea was actually a couple years ago. In October, then I just got on a reading binge of creepypasta.
Oh yeah.
And it's a really fun genre. Like the quality level varies wildly, but the sort of sense of this like urban legend quality mixed up with modern technology a lot of the time, I thought was really cool. And I got thinking about, like, if I was gonna make up a creepypasta, then, you know, kind of what would I be interested in playing with? And so I kind of hit on the idea of, I really like what you can do with augmented reality.
Yeah.
So you have, like, you know, Pokemon Go, or the Wizards Unite game that Niantic put out too, where, you know, you're going around with your phone and you're seeing these virtual things placed into the actual space that your phone camera can see. And so I went at that point to my friend Andrew. We've collaborated on tons of stuff over the years. And I'm just like, hey, I wanna do some kind of creepy movie with you. I've got this like core idea for kind of what we're working with scare wise. And he's like, okay,
every
great.
friend loves when you say, I want to make a creepy movie with you.
Yeah, right.
So sorry, go ahead.
And he's like, that sounds cool. So what's the story? And I'm like, that's a great question. And so we kind of used this, you know, what can you do with creepy augmented reality as a starting point. And then, you know, went to the characters, you know, who are the characters who are going to mess with this. And we went through a lot of iterations. When we brainstormed, we brainstormed to death. And you know, there are lots of rabbit trails you go down. And then you have those moments where something clicks and it comes together and it's just like, oh wow, yeah, no, that's terrifying. Let's do that.
Let's run with that. Yeah. Yeah.
And so we eventually landed on this plot of these two girls. One of them is babysitting the other, so sort of playing with this sibling rivalry and the little tension between, you know, this little girl who is old enough that she feels like she doesn't need a babysitter, and her older sister who's like, well, you know, this is what I have to do. And then sort of rooting the sort of heart of the movie in the relationship between the girls. And so when, you know, stuff gets bad, then you have, you know, this older sister who's kind of had this somewhat combative relationship with the younger sister, needing to like go out there and save her, and, you know, put herself in danger, walk in when she feels like she should be going out, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we really liked that idea as a character front. And so sort of bringing those ideas together, we built out this idea of, you know, maybe she thinks that her little sister installed this app on her phone that keeps like grabbing her attention and trying to get her to play it. And she's like, fine, I'm bored. And then just sort of gets drawn into this, and it gets creepy from there.
Yeah. It's very Black Mirror-esque, you know.
Yeah.
We like
wanted to play with that a little bit.
Yeah, like a horror technology vibe going on.
Yeah, but not anti-technology. We actually got asked that question at a film fest before. Somebody's like, "So, what are your thoughts on cell phones and screens?" And
I love
laugh and just like, very pro.
Yeah.
There's no point in this where we wanted to make it seem like the phone was the problem.
Mm-hmm.
The phone was merely an avenue,
like a
that
conduit
this
for it, yeah,
malevolent entity was using to break into their world.
Yeah, it was very much not a anti-technology PSA or a propaganda piece or whatever you want to call it.
It's just the world that we live in. You know, people have cell phones, and how can you involve that in being creepy?
Yeah. So you guys, you and Andrew have got this idea. You've brainstormed. You've come up with this idea. You know, the short itself is like 12 minutes.
something like that.
Ish.
11.
You know, so what is the script writing process? So you've come up with this thing and you're like, this would be a fun story. Do you write a script for this sort of thing, or do you just kind of have, obviously, like,
yeah. I mentioned that we brainstorm to death. We also revise to death.
Yeah.
So I'm usually the one who actually sits down at the computer and types it up.
Sure.
But then, we're passing drafts back and forth and, getting down to individual choices of words. And, when we really get into it, we really get into it. So, by the time we are actually shooting the script, then we have it basically internalized.
Sure. Yeah. So you guys have got that. Clearly you and Andrew, and I know Andrew, so I'm just going to refer to him in first person, like this, like clearly you and Andrew aren't on screen. So finding actors, finding a crew, how do those things, work? Are you going around knocking on doors? Do you use the movie makers group? Do you kind of have like a network of people that you call?
Yeah. So
I noticed I didn't get a call.
I'm sorry.
No, I think this is done before my time here in town. But really, like, you got the script. Where do you go from there? Finding cast and crew.
Right. So for hide and seek, then there were 4 actors we needed. We needed the 2 sisters. We needed their mom to make an appearance, and we needed the voice of the bunny in the app. And in the process of writing, then we were kind of brainstorming who we could talk to about maybe playing these parts as well. Like we had the script done before we actually approached anybody, but we had at least our first picks in mind, and all of them went for it, so that was great. But the 2 girls we had either worked with before or seen in other local stuff. Both of them had been in Pens to Lens movies. The older sister had been in our Pens to Lens movie. The younger sister actually had been in one of our previous Pens to Lens movie in a smaller role, but she was in a much larger role in a Pens to Lens movie that year, as right before we were working on this, right. And did a really fabulous job, and they looked kind of like they could be sisters. And so we're like, okay, we really want to try to get these 2 actresses. And then thinking about who would be believable as their mom, the actress that I ended up talking to, I had seen in a couple of plays at the Station Theater in Urbana. And I don't remember whether Mindy had done movies before this. I don't know. It doesn't matter. She did a great job.
Yeah, she came off really well on screen. I would have believed that she's done some on-screen acting rather than just stage stuff.
But yeah, so sort of shooting then the script was pretty easy. The easiest casting choice we had possible was the voice of the bunny. I mentioned Bill Kephart before as the one of the people who had the idea for Pens to Lens. Well, he for several years, he and Joe Taylor had this show that they put on every Halloween at the winery, a film fest with a live hosting theatrical portion called the Freaky Creek Film Fest. And it was hosted by Bill as a foul-mouthed, drug-doing Easter bunny. And it was the highlight of every year it happened. Yeah. It was the most wonderful thing ever to grace this community with his presence, and I feel its loss every day.
Yeah.
But we figured if we're going to be doing a creepy bunny, then we absolutely have to talk to Bill first. And luckily, he was delighted to do it. And so we got his wonderful voice talents as the creepy as bunny.
So you guys have got these people. How long did that take you to shoot? I mean, it's a 12-minute-ish, let's say, 12 to 15-minute short. Presumably you've got about that same many pages. It's all in essentially one location, the house, but multiple locations within the house. How long did the production take for you guys? And
so I think that we did it in 5 or 6 nights of shooting. So getting the location is a whole other story, because you cast your characters and you kind of cast a location too. figuring out where you're going to shoot this, what is going to be the right environment, what's going to be practical to get the shots that we wanted to get. And we were lucky enough to get to use the, frankly, mansion that we got to use. That was a family that we knew through Pens to Lens. Their kids had been involved both as writers and actors and filmmakers of their own projects. The Libman family. I had worked with all of their kids before, and Max in particular has been really ambitious about, running out there and getting his movies made. And so I was hoping that we could, shoot it in a way that we could sort of tie in a little film education for the kids when, we weren't shooting a terrifying scene that they probably shouldn't see. Yeah. So, I talked with their mom, and she was generous enough to let us come and scout the house, and even more generous to say, yeah, sure, you can shoot this movie here. What happened to work out best was they were on vacation for a couple weeks and just let us set up and leave stuff set up because they weren't there. So there was some degree we were on the clock to make sure that we got everything done. We ended up needing to go back in a couple of pickups, which I was very apologetic about.
Yeah.
But predominantly we got everything in that house done in a couple of weekends. When the one scene that actually takes place in a totally different location, there's a scene that takes place in the little sister's bedroom, which we ended up actually shooting that at Andrew's house in his daughter's room.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And just sort of shooting it in such a way that you can kind of cut from one location to another, and the movement of the character feels like you're in the same space. Really common trick. I've sometimes stitched as many as 4 houses together to make one location for a movie.
Yeah.
So
I would not have known. I thought it was all one location.
Oh, good. Yeah. The magic of filmmaking.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was over the course of I want to say 5 or 6 nights.
That's not too bad. I actually expected it to be almost double that, honestly, with how well produced it was. To your credit.
Thank you.
But so you guys filmed this stuff. You've got the cast. You found the casting crew, all that stuff. You filmed it. There's some really good augmented reality stuff going on in this phone.
Thank you.
In the short. What does your post-production process look like for that? And tie onto that question, Tom, sorry to interrupt. After you're done filming and doing it, I mean, you've had this done for a while now and it's still not available to the public. So post-production and then release process.
Sure.
What does that look like?
So, in particular for the phone VFX,
sure.
What we ended up doing was, there's a really great, I think, free app put out by, if you know, the Rocket Jump guys.
Yeah.
So they have an app that basically gives you a customizable screen tracker. So you can just have your screen go green with some slightly paler tracking X's. And, you have some control over the actual color that it is, the contrast with the X's, to sort of tone in what you need for the particular shot you're doing. And then I found an app that let me record phone video in the background. So basically what we did when we were doing a shot where you were going to see augmented reality on the screen is I would just start that recording, flip it over to the green screen portion, and we would do, 5 or 6 takes with just that continuous video going. And then I'd sync it up in After Effects and scroll to the particular chunk that I was actually going to use. And so what you're seeing on the screen is what the phone was seeing at that given moment. And then I just had layers and layers of pre-comps to go in and, do VFX on the phone video itself. So I could, do 3D tracking in there to place an object in there and then track it onto the screen as that's moving around. And it was this whole thing.
Yeah.
I think that we had maybe fewer than 30 augmented reality shots. But that was a whole process.
They were good. I will, as a viewer, they were stellar, because I was blown away that you could get the, when you're looking at a phone, obviously it's just the time right now, but when you're looking at the phone camera, it was crystal clear, good camera. And I was blown away by how you got that recording and then were able to like insert augmented reality stuff in it. So that makes so much more sense to me
Good.
now that you explain it. But at the time, I rarely find myself going, how did they do that? And I was wondering when I was watching that, how you had pulled that off.
Win.
So you did well. But
in terms of post in general,
Yep.
then it depends on the project. Usually, then the people working on post is me and Andrew, and then a composer lives in Decatur, has scored, I don't know, half of the Pens to Lens movies. The dude is a machine and fantastic to work with and extremely talented. Eric Watkins did the score for Hide and Seek. And so we will basically try to get edit lock before we hand it off to him. And then Andrew was predominantly working on the sound and sound effects. I was working on the VFX, and Watkins was working on the music once we had the actual everything timing locked, so that we didn't need to keep going back and forth and making Eric scoot things around. We might have had a little bit of that, but we try to minimize that.
Yeah.
And then release. So yeah, like I mentioned, it's not publicly available yet. A lot of film fests don't consider, especially bigger film fests, don't consider movies that have been freely available online because they want to give an exclusive experience for the audience and have the movies be this sort of draw that you can't see them anywhere else. So for those projects, it's usually about a year between we finish the movie and we actually make it publicly available online.
Right.
We did really want to have a good local premiere. And so we did that at the Krampusnacht Film Fest where you saw it.
Yeah.
So, we always want to share it with a local audience as soon as we can.
Yeah.
But, absent renting out a theater and showing our 15-minute movie, then, a lot of the time it's just, it has to go to a local fest or we have to wait to release it once it's made the rounds.
Right. How does that feel when you have got this like great project? It's got like, it's been well received and you're just sitting on it waiting for it. And you're like, like I get done with a YouTube video or something and I'm like, before I even have anyone review it, I want to click, publish or whatever. Like that's gotta be like, it's gotta be so stressful, or like, do you just have to like put it out of your mind and worry about the next project?
Yeah, so I kind of take the same approach to that as I do submitting to film festivals. Which can also be very, very stressful, sitting around wondering if you made it in or not. So, most of the time when you submit to fest, it's not going to play there. Like, I think the best ratio I've ever gotten for a project is half of the places that I submitted it got in, and that is insane. Like that is a whole lot. And, more often than we're looking at maybe 20% is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
So when I submit to a festival, then I will, find a festival. Usually I'm looking for something that is close enough that I could actually go to it and, get to see the movie with an audience.
Right.
Or a festival that is a particularly good fit or has the sorts of movies that I would really want to see. I've actually sort of latched on to the H.P. Lovecraft Film Fest in Portland, Oregon for the past, I don't know, nearly 10 years at this point. I've gone almost every year. I've sent tons of movies that way. They haven't played all of them, but they've played enough of them that I feel really good about sending new projects off that way. They probably are going to like it. But yeah, I send it off to a festival and I don't know if it's going to get accepted or not. And so I just then forget about it. And then, several months later, in some cases, you'll come up to the notification date and you'll get the email from Film Freeway and it'll either say it's in or it isn't. And if it isn't in, then it's just like, oh yeah, I forgot I did that. Oh, well, okay. And if it is in, then it's like, oh, hey, that's great. We're getting the festival. Like, woo. So, kind of the same thing with not being able to release it yet.
Mm-hmm.
I know that we're not going to put it out there until it's had its run. So it might be, next Halloween that we're putting it up online. And so, I just sort of forget about it. And then when we come up there, it's like, oh, awesome. We have this thing that we can share. This is going to be really fun.
Yeah. I think that would probably, I just know me, that would drive me nuts. But I also totally get it because, it's not just for, the YouTube audience, it's for the Film Fest audience. And, they have their own kind of rules and regulations. That brings me to another question, actually, is my one and only Film Fest experience was the Krampusnacht. Am I pronouncing that right?
As far as I know.
Okay.
I don't speak German, so
Sure.
I can't for 100% say that it's right.
Krampusnacht, for any German viewers or listeners, I apologize. But I pressed play on the Blu-ray player to play the DVD, which probably more so than anything showcases that I should not be hosting a podcast about filmmaking.
You did more than press play on the DVD. You took the stress of worrying about whether I needed to, get off stage and start everything.
Sure.
And you took that off of my mind. And so I could do my thing. It was great.
But you started a film festival here in Champaign.
Yeah.
This last year. Talk to me about that. Like, were you just like, I got nothing to go on Friday. Why don't I just do this?
The idea has been percolating for a while. It was very much inspired by, I mentioned the Freaky Creek Film Fest, and missing that dearly, and wanting to, you can't replace something that fun, that cool.
Yeah.
But you can sort of try to harness the spirit a little and make a new thing that might have its own charm. And so at the point that I was first thinking about doing this, I think it might have been 2018, 2017. And around that time, then there were actually a lot of film fests locally in October. There was the New Art Film Fest, which until recently when the art theater went away.
Yep.
The New Art Film Fest was, a collection of lots of movies from the general area, outside of necessarily strictly CU, reaching as far as Bloomington and the other surrounding areas, that a local guy named Jason Pankoki has been putting together for like 10 years. That's always a good time, but, I didn't want to compete with it when I had this other film fest that I was wanting to do. That particular year, there was also a Shocktober Film Fest that ran with another horror fest in October, and another local guy, Jared Finn, had the Champagne Horror Fest. And it's just like, man, October is crowded.
Yeah.
I really want to do this, Spirit of Freaky Creek Festival, but there's just way too much in October.
Yeah.
And then I realized that every year, Christmas starts earlier and earlier and earlier. And those of us that really love Halloween would like to have some space for just Halloween. And we don't really get that because Christmas is all time now.
Yeah.
And so
as early as Easter this year, essentially.
Yeah, right.
They started advertising for it.
So not that I don't like Christmas, but I thought that it would be funny to invade Christmas space with a little bit of Halloween to kind of push back.
Yeah.
And
a little Tim Burton, the Tim Burton.
Yeah, right?
Menu,
yeah. Nightmare Before Christmas, one of my favorite movies. Yeah. Let's mix the two up. And so that's where the idea for running it around Krampusnacht came from, because Krampusnacht, for anyone who's not familiar, is about the Krampus, who's sort of the shadow of St. Nicholas. So instead of bringing toys to the good children, he comes and kidnaps the bad children and beats them with sticks and horrible things.
Yeah. There was a recent movie made about it within the past 6 or 7 years.
Krampus, yeah.
Krampus. And then also, I feel like Dwight from The Office.
Did he make a reference to that?
Yeah, but Bell's Nickel or something like that. I can't remember what it was, but I feel like he made some sort of Krampus-y Christmas reference at one point. But so you've got the festival. You're invading Christmas.
Invading Christmas.
Yes.
Krampusnacht itself is the night before the Feast of St. Nicholas. So the night of December 5th. So, we ended up having the fest on, I think it was the 7th, whatever the Saturday closest to the 5th was, for scheduling. But, it's sort of hooking on to that time, that holiday, and saying, we're going to have some fun with this. We're going to play with this idea of having the Christmas season, but make it just a little darker. So, the movies we were looking for weren't necessarily strictly Krampus related. We had a special awards category for best holiday film. So there was special consideration played for any submissions that sort of played with the idea of holidays or twisting a holiday story, that sort of thing. But in general, Krampusnacht is about freaky films. It's sort of dark in a fun way. So dark comedy or horror with a sort of twisted, fun bend to it. And we managed to get a program of like 2.5 hours. I think I had to limit myself to.
Yeah.
There were a number of really fabulous entries that I had to turn down, and it pained me so much to do it. But we needed to have some time limits on the actual show.
Yeah.
But yeah, so getting that together was a blast, and I am excitedly watching submissions for the 2020 edition coming in.
Yeah, I just saw on Facebook those are due Monday.
So
they were due
the
this
regular
Monday?
deadline actually is today as we are recording this.
Okay, yeah.
But the way the Film Freeway works, there's just tiered submission fees. So in maybe 6 weeks or so, there's going to be a late deadline and then extended deadline. If you are in the CU area, submission is free. Just message me. I'll get you the password for the particular submission category that lets you send stuff in, because that was another thing that I really wanted to emphasize is get some local stuff in there, because that was a really fun part about Freaky Creek was people would get together. I would organize meetings with friends and we're like, okay, what are we making for Freaky Creek this year? And so I would love it if people did that sort of thing. We inspired that sort of creativity with this fest. So yeah, that is in progress. I'm very excited for what the second annual Krampusnacht Freaky Film Fest can bring.
Yeah. And here's hoping that we're out of quarantine by then.
Oh god, yes.
But
I love the memes going around Facebook saying "Save Halloween."
Yeah,
it's like
stay inside right now.
Everybody, please stay home now, so we don't have to for Halloween.
I know. But I mean, honestly, it's one of those things where festivals might have to change. Based on unfortunately based on this stuff.
A fest that I've had stuff play at before and sent hide and seek to this year that is scheduled for, I think it's the beginning of September, mid-September, somewhere in there. They just sent something out today talking about like, okay, we're hoping we don't need to change plans, but just so everybody knows what we're thinking. So, there's a lot of contingency planning going on right now.
Cool. Well, if you need me to press play from afar this next year, just let me know. But yeah, I mean, this has been great, Tom. I don't really have any other questions. I think that, all this is so inspiring to come to a community and see the level of creativity and filmmaking that exists and that is being, supported from like the ground up. I mean, really, you're inspiring these kids to make films. You're helping them to do it. You are, supporting the filmmaking community at large, and then getting people involved, kind of in their, their downtimes or their spare times or whatever. And it's been really great to see that. And I don't have any other questions for you. Do you have any questions for me? You can say no, because I don't have anything to talk about, frankly.
I don't think so. I think.
Yeah. What was your favorite commercial you worked on this year, Adam? But cool.
I guess that is a question with quarantine being what it is, how has your workload changed, and is it making it more or less likely that you're going to have a personal project coming up in the near future?
So that is a phenomenal question. For those of you listening or watching, at a later date, this was like right in the midst of the quarantine, the COVID-19.
Yeah, just a couple days ago, we had the statewide lockdown extended through May. So
Yeah.
that's what on everybody's mind right now.
Yeah. So if you're basing this on a timeline, yeah, the timeline's extended through May. 3 days ago, we were told to inject bleach into ourselves to solve this, crisis.
Chief.
Yeah, so my freelance business is, essentially like dried up in a grand sense. I film a lot of events, I film a lot of commercials. Those things require other people, the same way a film does. And we can't gather. It's not safe to. It's not, it's just not pertinent. And the longer we go on, the longer people want to do those things, the more people want to do those things, the longer this whole thing's going to take. So I've had a lot of events canceled, which means I've had a lot of projects canceled. I've had events pushed back. So, things that are saying, hey, we normally do this parade on this day every year. That's canceled until next year. So that project for this year, essentially, I'm not making any money off of. Other events are for commercials that are not necessarily time sensitive. Those have been pushed back. So those are, hey, maybe we'll work on that in September or something. Obviously it's a big problem for someone who freelances. The upside of these things is that, I have found myself with a good amount of, I don't want to say free time, but time that I normally would dedicate towards, my paid freelance work that pays my bills, that I'm, able to do other things. My garden looks phenomenal, with all that free time. But my main focus right now, or recently, has been producing educational content, my YouTube tutorials and stuff. And the reason...
your Premiere tutorials are great.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Those, I said boobies in one the other day, so I had to delete the whole thing. Just so you know, I'm going to re-edit that one later. But the reason I have a personal project, and it's like kind of a short horror film that I want to produce, and I want to do it for Krampusnacht.
Oh yes.
It's like a one actor thing. If I could talk my wife into doing it, I could probably get away with it. Otherwise, I'm still probably going to have to wait a few weeks until I can find someone to do it. And there's some other advanced costuming that it requires. It's a little bit more of like a monstery sort of thing. But I'm hoping that this frees up that kind of time and lets me do it. Honestly, there's literally not a better time to do it. I've been seeing some just insane stuff on the internet that people are creating, by themselves, but as a community. So, the one that I've seen this week is the stunt coordinators one. I don't know if you've seen that one. That is like where there's like 40 of them, and each of them punches the camera, and then the next one takes that and it's like, oh, and then one of them hits the camera with a banana, and then the other guy is getting hit with a banana from this end, and it's just amazing. And the amount of creativity that these sort of parameters that are put on us is causing is just really cool. So I'm hoping I'm hoping I get off my ass and I'm able to do that in the next few weeks, hopefully. And fingers crossed that this thing sort of lets up and lets us all get back to normal, including kind of the pins to lens thing, which is coming up, comes up over the summer. That's the main time that I know you guys work on that, and fingers crossed I'll be able to help out on some projects for that too. Great question, Tom. Thank you for asking. I get so few people that ask about me. Tom, last thing, if anyone wants to connect with you, on the internet or in person, or find more of your work, how can they do that? Is there a website or a Facebook or a street address or anything?
So I have, to some degree, tried to make it easy by sort of tying it all to the same moniker. My Instagram I have pretty much exclusively devoted to filmmaking stuff.
Yep.
And that is TD Nicol, Nicol.
Great. Singular.
And singular.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you.
No H, no E. Everybody wants to add extra letters. Nicol. So TD Nicol is my Instagram. tdnicol@gmail.com is my email. tdnicol.com is where I've collected my various projects, if it's streaming on YouTube or Vimeo. I might have some links to some other places for isolated things, but pretty much just sort of gathering everything into one place.
Your Tumblr is out there?
Do not have a Tumblr. I missed that train.
Me too.
But yeah, those would be the main places if people are interested in my filmmaking stuff.
Cool. That's great. Yeah, you've got a great library of stuff out there right now, and I'm gonna have to have you back on to talk about stop motion stuff, because that's something that I think you do incredibly well, and it's definitely a niche sort of branch of filmmaking and stuff, and I do want to hear more about that. But otherwise, Tom, thanks for taking the time to chat with me on random quarantined Monday
Quarantine
night.
live.
Yeah, quarantine Monday night. So yeah, I will, for anyone listening or watching, getting in touch with Tom will be easy. I'm going to put links for all of that stuff down below. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch and listen, and I'll see you in the next episode.